And good morning, I'm Tracy Sinclair here at Alaska's News Source. We are getting ready for a press conference live from Juneau. We don't actually know what the topic is. The governor has called this press conference and we are going to bring it to you live as soon as it goes live. So I just wanted to say that we are here. We're just waiting for the press conference to begin, and at that point we will bring it to you live and in its entirety. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be with you as soon as this begins. Again, we are waiting for just a few minutes as we await for Governor Mike Dunleavy to begin the press conference, and it looks like they are getting started down there. Let's join in.
SCS 69, the finance bill. And there were really two reasons for the veto. One of the reasons is that the revenue situation has deteriorated a lot since we submitted the bills and worked off of budget in December. And the second reason for the veto is there's no policy in the bill. So those are the reasons that we vetoed the bill at this time. We still have 34 days left in the session. We still have plenty of time to get a bill passed. We know what the policies are. We know how to get to the end game here. So we're also going to, at the same time, introduce a bill here today that we'll talk about some of the highlights in a moment here that we believe can get us there. So some will say, well, you know, Governor, we've been through this, We have. We've been through this with the READS Act too. We'll talk about the results of some of the what we're seeing at the READS Act as well. But I want to just get you to think about something for a moment. Kentucky just ended their legislative session. They had numerous bills passed. You know how long the Kentucky legislative session is this year? 30 days. That's on odd years. And even years, the Kentucky legislature meets for 60 days. And they get a budget and numerous bills passed in a 60-day period. So we have 34 days left. A lot of work has been done on education. And I still remain optimistic that we can get something done. And so the bill that we're going to introduce today has a BSA equivalent of $700. It's an increase. We'll talk about that in a moment. And this is a bill that if agreed upon by the legislature, I'll sign tomorrow morning. I'll sign Monday. I'll sign Tuesday. I would have signed a month ago because it will have policies in there. We'll have policies that will help kids, and it will have the funding that is also being requested as well. So again, I remain an optimist. I know that sometimes the legislative process is clunky, but nonetheless, I think it's important that we get a good educational bill that has the input from a cross-section of the legislature. And so I would ask legislative leadership and those in charge of the committees that the bills would go through, let's get them through the committees as quickly as possible, and let's get a bill signed so that we have certainty in education. I want to also bring your attention back to last year about this time. I know it sounds like it's back to the future, but we've had similar conversations on this a year ago. And around this time last year, I think it was in March actually, we actually in the midst of the discussion last year, we commissioned a poll to be done by Dittman. We didn't know where the people were on a number of these topics. Same poll that some of you have seen. But I just want to reiterate some of the key findings of that poll. 77% support increasing the BSA. I and my administration are part of that 77%. 75% support an open enrollment system. This is apparently one of the sticking points, one of the policies that people that are opposing the policy part of the bill is struggling with. And what open enrollment really is if you have a student in South, and for whatever reason, and all of us are individuals, for whatever reason, they think it's better if they go to East or they go to some other high school in Anchorage, this allows that to happen. It would also allow a parent that works in the Mat-Su, lives in the Mat-Su but works in Anchorage, to be able to enroll their kid in Anchorage. These are all public schools, public school students looking for a public outcome. We don't see what the problem is, to be perfectly honest with you. You know, as many as you know, I have a master's in education. I taught, I was a principal, I was a superintendent, I was a board member. Dr. Bishop has a PhD in education. I think it's, where's Dr. Bishop? Oh, it's right behind me. How many years do you have as a superintendent?
Superintendent was 11.
So 11 years in the two largest school districts in the state of Alaska. She has some idea on what's happening with education. She has some idea on what we should do with policies. 64% of Alaskans polled support a greater allocation of education funding to public charter schools. These are public schools. 58% support a greater allocation of education funding to homeschooling. Got a robust homeschooling program in the state of Alaska. 57% think changes and reforms are most important to improving educational outcomes. So a majority of Alaskans agree with the approaches that we've been taking here the last year to try and get policy and an increase in the educational funding for schools. Conversely, this is last year, but conversely, only 23% support the use of the PFD to increase funding. So, the last thing I want to just bring your attention to, I think before we open this up for questions on the bill, the veto, what we're looking at for the future, funding, et cetera, I thought it was a great editorial. Is the ADN here today? It's a great editorial last year, Sean, by the editorial board. I don't know if they want to be reminded of it, but it was a great editorial. And just going to go to one area here. And they wrote this. I didn't write this. But it said, but simply rubber stamping a large BSA increase doesn't make sense. Dunleavy and like-minded legislatures rightly mistrust school districts' tendency to grow administration with money meant for the classroom. They point to the fact that student enrollment has declined over the years, but school district spending declines haven't kept pace. That's why the education bill awaiting passage in the House, this is a year ago, along the same time the poll I just mentioned was coming out. That's why the education bill awaiting passage in the House has a BSA increase, this is last year, of $300. More would risk vetoes of Republican legislators whose votes are needed for the passage. While a moderate BSA increase is warranted, this is their words, moderate. The bill I vetoed this morning wasn't 300, it's 1,000. While a moderate BSA increase is warranted, the Dunleavy approach of weighting that support to classroom instruction is the more responsible path. That's the ADN. So with that, we've got a bill we're introducing today. We've got 34 days less in the session. If Kentucky can do numerous bills every year in 30 days, we've got plenty of time to get a bill out. We support funding. I would like to see that in some of the reporting done today. We support funding, but we're not going to support a very large, unbalanced, one-sided coin that is just funding when we have opportunities to improve educational outcomes. The Reads Act was a tough fight. It only passed by one vote. Senator Begich and myself worked for quite some time on that bill and that concept. Only passed by one vote. I'm going to ask the commissioner just very briefly to just, again, give us a quick snapshot of what has occurred in reading for our early elementary kids since that bill was passed.
Thank you, Governor. In 1 year of accountability, the bill now is almost in its third year. In the first year of accountability, Alaska's kindergarten, first and second grade students outpaced the national growth dramatically. Alaska's kindergarten, first and second grade students outpaced the growth in this student learning assessment dramatically as compared to the national average. Policy matters. Strong policy matters.
So, it wasn't an increase per se over the last couple of years in the BSA. We know that. Now, some will say, well, the reason we're not doing well in recent years is because we don't have enough money. I'm going to ask the commissioner to come up again. And in 2011, in Alaska, in which we had more revenue, more oil production, what were the NAEP scores in Alaska in fourth grade in reading? Where did we rank as a state in 2011?
In the year 2011, the National Assessment of Education Progress for Alaska students ranked us at 51 out of 52 possible. We were 51. There's 50 states, but the others are the District of Columbia, as well as the Department of Defense schools. So those were the total 52 possible, and we were 51.
So I just think we have to be honest. Everybody does, right? The schools need more money. They do. That was 24 years ago. The schools need more money. We've had a huge spike in inflation just a couple of years ago. So there's no doubt. There's no doubt. The thing that I can't understand, a guy that's been in the classroom, teacher, principal, et cetera, with a master's in education, spent time in rural Alaska in education and in urban Alaska, a PhD that has served 11 years in our two largest school districts. We look at each other oftentimes and we go, we just don't get it. What is the issue? Why is it so difficult to allow a kid to go from south to west in a public school? This isn't a voucher system we're asking for. This is allowing a child from Matsu to go to school in Anchorage, vice versa. These are public schools. We don't get it. We don't get why when you have the only study, I know there's been a work cited by an individual in Fairbanks, but through PhDs in Harvard and Stanford, whatever you think about Harvard and Stanford, the only study on outcomes, there's a lot of studies that have been done, a lot of research on inputs into charter schools, but the only study on outputs was done by these people, and it came out last November. It showed Alaska's charter schools perform better than any other charter school system in the nation. Terrific, right? We should have more of those. No, not according to NEA Alaska and not according to their friends here in the legislature. We hope that changes, but it makes no logical sense to not want to pursue better educational outcomes when we have the ability to do that. There's an attempt to reward reading by increasing money into the reading program, just doing it willy-nilly. The bill that we're introducing again puts reading into those efforts that are actually producing results. This is what happened in Mississippi. Now, what's interesting, in 2011, in the NAEP scores in fourth grade reading, Mississippi was at 50%. I think at 50, they were at 50th or 51st. They were right with us at the bottom. They have zoomed past this because of their focus on reading policy. They didn't zoom past us just because they put more money in education. There really is no research, and there's no historical precedence in Alaska that more money is going to change that outcome. And I think intuitively, I'm not going to put you guys on the spot, but I think intuitively you know that. I think you do. And I think most Alaskans know that. The problem with the bill that we just vetoed was, from a fiscal perspective again, the fiscals have deteriorated since December dramatically. We're in the 60s in terms of oil revenue, and 63 or 64 bucks a barrel. And that'll change. That may go up. It's going to go up. It's going to go down. And people will ask for, well, Dunleavy, what about new taxes? I've told legislative leadership, I'm not interested in new taxes. I'm not interested in a program that taxes and spends. I said I would sit down with them again, like I did 2 years ago. I would sit down with them here in June and going into the summer to craft a fiscal plan that brings in everything from sideboards to use of technology to become more efficient. And yes, I would even listen to the conversations and be part of the conversations if and when we need new revenues. But just the tax and spend bill, not interested. Why am I not interested? 7 years ago, maybe 8 years ago, I think when I was still a senator, I said, the moment you start to dip in, if you remember, I left the caucus. I was a finance member. I left the caucus because I said this PFD is now on the path to disappearing. What are they contemplating today? 25% of the PFD, and some even lower. So it's going to be gone. And the SBR will be gone. So there's no doubt we have to have discussions about what's the fiscal plan. What is the fiscal plan going to look like going forward? We have to do that. I've said I'll spend all day, all year doing that if we're going to do that. But if we're just going to talk about it, it doesn't make sense. And again, it depends on how you want to use your time. If every single year Kentucky can conduct business in 30 days, if we did that, we would be out by February 15th every year. So it can be done. So when they're doing things in other places, and when people tell you it can't happen here, you really should ask the question, why can't it happen here? Happens there. Happens there in Kentucky with the legislative session. Happens in Mississippi with reading programs. It certainly can happen here. And so that's what we're just trying to inject what we believe is some common sense, some data, some research in the whole program. I'm going to ask Lacey to come up and just talk about revenue and how the numbers have changed since December.
Good morning, everyone. Lacey Sanders, Director of Office of Management and Budget. When the budget was released in December, the forecast for revenue projections in 2026 were at $70 a barrel, coming up to about $6.2 billion for revenue. In March, when the spring forecast was released, that number was reduced down to $68 a barrel, reducing the amount of revenue that we had available. Since then, we've continued to see the decreases or declines in the price per barrel. And right now, in working with the Department of Revenue, that number is down to about $63 a barrel, reducing revenue to about $5.9 billion. So overall, since December, we've seen a decrease in available revenue to the state by $300 million, which is a substantial decrease than what we faced in December. Happy.
Not yet. And so I do want to thank Senate Finance leadership, right? Those guys have been around a long time. I think between the three co-chairs, it's 84 years they've been in the legislature. And they understand. They've been through the ups and downs, and they see what's happening. And so there's a lot of chaos that happens in any legislative session anywhere. And there's been a lot of what people would perceive as chaos this year. And there will continue to be some chaos. That's part of the messy process that the founders set up. But there is a recognition that our fiscals have deteriorated. Again, that's the main reason, and the lack of policy in the bill. And so we have a chance here for the next 34 days to get, I think, a good bill passed. And I would call upon the guys that are really pushing the money-only bill, NEA and others, School Boards Association, School Administrative Association, all of which I was part of at one time in my career, to just have discussions with people and say, hey, let's get a two-sided coin that works. We get this thing passed, we got certainty going forward. Because if this is passed, right, this is not one-time funding. This isn't a bill that means funding every year. That's the beauty of this. But it also means policies, like the READS Act, like our charter schools that are performing phenomenally. So I really don't understand where the thinking is coming from, that we are going to, literally, it's my interpretation, that those that are opposing policy believe that is more important to oppose the policy than to get the funding. And that's important for people to know in the schools. The opposition to the policy, kid going from South to Bartlett, from Wasilla High to South, that's a hill they're going to die on. So I asked them why that's a hill they're going to die on. If you're a mother, if you're a parent, if you're a coach, if you're a teacher, if you're a paraprofessional, if you're a cook, ask yourself the question, why would they die on that hill? It makes no sense. I can't figure it out. She's been in education a long time. I've been in education a long time. It makes no sense to me. Why would you die on a hill that you have the best performing charter schools in the nation, and all you're asking for, you're not asking for private charters. What we're asking for is very simple. Don't stand in the way of parent groups that want to start a charter. And don't try and hamstring a charter that's trying to get up and going. Support it, because they're performing well. Why wouldn't you want to do that? I don't have the answer to that. And with regard to our homeschools, there's, what is there? How many kids in homeschool roughly across the state? There's 22,000 reasons for that. And I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand, but if you have a child, you have a much different perspective than if you didn't have a child. It doesn't make you a better or worse person. You just have a different perspective. But if you have a child, I won't be able to collect on the bet, but I bet a decent sum of money that you're going to think very carefully where you place your child based upon your child's needs, because you as the parent know your child better than anybody. That's a fact. So with that, Jeff, well, we'll open up for questions and get going with it.
Okay, we're going to start with the 5 reporters on the teleconference line. We'll take our first question from Ashlyn O'Hara at KDLL in Kenai. Ashlyn, your question, please.
Hi, Governor, and thanks for holding this press conference today. I want to follow up on a lot of the topics you just raised. Our very specific situation here on the Kenai Peninsula, as you may know, is our board has 13 days to fill in a $17 million budget shortfall. And, you know, if you ask them, you know, the district would say they're trying to adhere to a lot of your policy priorities. We've got open enrollment across 42 schools. We've got a new charter school opening this fall. There's demonstrated growth in student literacy since they implemented a science of reading curriculum. But, you know, they're still calling for a significant BSA increase. And I guess I'm wondering what you would say to a district like ours that is trying to implement some of your priorities, but is still struggling in the finance department.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think they're spot on. They're doing many of the things that we're talking about. Let's just put it in a bill so it's law and it's for the entire state. So I agree with Kenai. So if I was Kenai, I would be saying to the folks in the legislature that are opposing the very practices and policies that Kenai is putting into place that we're also talking about, I would ask Kenai to ask the folks here in the legislature, what is the big deal? We're already doing it. That's what I've heard that several times. We're already doing it. Codify it in law. So it's not an if from one year to the next. So it is not subject to the whim of a new superintendent or a new school board. Codify it in law. It's simple. I agree with you, Kenai.
Okay, let's go to the next question from Ira Samuels at the Anchorage Daily News.
Hi, Governor. I'm hoping you can share with us 3 years from now, when you're no longer governor, what you hope Alaskans look back on and think of as your legacy in education field.
I would hope that they know that we fought like crazy to get policies in place that help kids and help parents who are struggling to find a great setting and a great opportunity for their kids. Alaska is incredible. You know, we have homeschool, divorced of public school. Kids are being homeschooled by parents. We have homeschools as part of public schools, 24,000 of them. I think it was 22 or 24. 22,000. Charter schools. Robust charter school system, best in the nation. Homeschooling and charter schools were not really accepted when the concept first came on the scene in Alaska. I know because I was there. I was a superintendent. I was a principal back then. There were superintendents that fought each other and argued with each other over the benefits of homeschool, public homeschool, the benefits of charter schools. And it's the same tired arguments, to be quite honest, I hear today from educators that I know. It's competition to our neighborhood schools. It's going to hurt our neighborhood schools. When I was 19 years old, I think if I can remember that far back, I remember when I was taking pondering a career choice, and teaching was something I really thought about doing because I really liked education. I like education. I like learning something new every day. But never once when I was 19 and I wanted to go into education did I say to myself, I'm doing this because I want to stop opportunities for kids. I'm doing this because I want to die on the hill of preserving the status quo. I'm doing this because doing anything different than educating kids other than a neighborhood school. And my kids all went to neighborhood schools. I went to neighborhood schools. I never thought about that. I thought about how do you help kids? How do you help kids with that aha moment? How do you help that kid that's struggling with math and they look up with a big smile on their face and they finally get it? And then 20 years later, they tell you they have a PhD in math. How do you do it with a kid that loves history? And you find out later on that they're working for a think tank or they're working for a department in Washington, and they say, thank you for inspiring me and supporting my desire to understand history. The list goes on and on. That's why you go into education. You don't go into, when you're 19 years old, saying, hey, I'm going to become a teacher because I want to help any Alaska stop any and all opportunities for kids. None of us ever thought about that. We talked about helping kids. So the legacy, I guess, Iris, that I would look at is that there will be some in the NEA camp that will say he was horrible, he was terrible, he didn't care about teachers. Last year, we had a component in the bill that would have paid teachers in urban Alaska $5,000, in some of our rural areas $10,000, and in our most remote, hard-to-fill districts, $15,000 a year. The unions didn't like that. They didn't like that. And I want to remind teachers of that. It wasn't us that killed that. It was us that put it forth. Because recruitment and retention is a problem. I've had teachers come up to me and say, I've been teaching for X amount of years in X amount of district in urban Alaska. I would have went out there with my skill set to rural Alaska under those conditions. And I would have stayed there for a while, at least. That was killed. That's no longer in the discussion. We can't have that discussion. We're not going to do that for teachers. So I hope the legacy is that I fought for kids, not programs. That I fought for parents, not systems. We're not even talking about, this is the fascinating thing, we're not even talking about private education here in Alaska. You look across the country, all kinds of educational choice is sweeping the country. And here in Alaska, we're doubling down on no. We're doubling down on, not going to let that happen. Because if that happens, more people may enjoy that, and more people may benefit from that. And then what happens? We're in trouble. So I would hope, Iris, the legacy is going to be, he was the guy behind SB 89 that helped expand homeschool concepts. He was the guy that supported charter schools. He was the guy that worked for many years as the project coordinator for this teacher mentor project. He was the guy that ran for his school board because he cared so much about kids and education. And he was the guy that ran for Senate and governor because he wanted to have better outcomes for kids and people in the state of Alaska. And if you look at all the bills I've put forward, you really look at them, they're really bills that improve the situation, I believe, for individuals. Alaska and Juneau, it's a fascinating place. A lot of special interest hammerlock on things. A lot of lobbying on things. And sometimes there is an intersect between good policy and the lobbying and the special interest. But other times there's not. And I'm going to end it with this, Iris. I would say that hopefully the legacy is when it came to supporting special interests over the needs of individual Alaskans. I lived in rural Alaska, and I always remember the image of older folks up there collecting wood to heat their houses in America. And this is one of the reasons why I fought for the PF. That beautiful thing is almost gone. But I hope that the legacy is that Dunleavy, the lobbyists may not have liked him. Special interests certainly didn't like them, tried to recall him. I hope the legacy is that he fought for the individuals that had no lobbyists, had no voice in Juneau, couldn't afford the flight down, didn't have the mass media systems in place, but just hope that we did better government. All right, next question, Jeff.
Okay, our next question is from Beth Verge with Alaska's News Source. Beth, your question, please.
Governor, you talked a little bit about funding mechanisms, some of what's behind the ability to pay for things such as education. I know you mentioned oil prices a couple times today. Are you basing any of the new bill's provisions on specific federal level markers, such as tariffs or the like?
No, this is an education bill. I know that people would like to think that maybe I'm behind the whole tariff thing with the federal government, but my focus is on the state of Alaska. My focus is on what's happening in the state of Alaska. And so this is an education bill, and the policies are very familiar to what we've talked about and what we've been talking about during the press conference.
Okay, our next question is from Jack Barnwell with the Fairbanks Daily News Miner. Jack?
Hi, Governor. Say if the legislature does agree to policy changes.
I'll sign it tomorrow morning.
Do you have any room for compromise on the BSA increase? Say they want to increase it beyond your proposed $700 increase.
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. I would have to have, we'd have to have the discussion as to what that increase would actually impact. So that would be the best answer I could give you. That was Jack? Yeah.
Okay,
Thank
and
you.
our
Yeah, you're welcome.
last question on the teleconference line is from Ian Stewart with Your Alaska Link.
Hi, Governor.
Hi.
Hey, so you said that you were kind of open to discussions if legislation wants to propose something a little bit more than your $700. But what led to the decision of just $700?
The fiscal realities. It's tough. It's real tough. You've watched the legislature, especially the House, struggle over how to put a final budget together. And I'll say this: if we knew you never know what the fiscals are. But if we were talking about fiscals that we're dealing with right now, back in December when we introduced our budget would probably look a lot different at the time. But I think you're seeing folks are struggling, and there's all kinds of huge asks. There's still some folks, and I'm not belittling them because it was a goal. It was almost nirvana when it comes to revenue. But I think still, some folks are still operating off of what our revenue picture was 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Billions of dollars in excess in the different accounts and so forth. And so it was almost like a Make-A-Wish Foundation. But the realities today are different. And so we have to deal with those realities. And so the fiscal issue is a big issue.
Okay, we're going to start with questions in the room, beginning with John McGuire with the Anchorage Daily News.
Firstly, could we see the education bill that you're going to propose tomorrow before it gets introduced?
When should that be done? The education bill. Okay. Okay.
Will we see a copy before?
Do we give it to the press before we give it to the legislature?
Okay. Governor, I'm just wondering, you mentioned policies like open enrollment. Could you explain how that would improve student outcomes?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Every kid is an individual. And if they're going to a school in their zip code, and there's a hard and fast rule that they must go to that school and only that school, and they are having issues with kids on the bus, kids on the playground, maybe they have disagreements with teachers, maybe they have issues, maybe they have autism, maybe they're on the low end, maybe they're on the high end, maybe they have other disabilities. Every single human being is an individual. We all have our own fingerprint. You want to set up as many vehicles under the public education umbrella as possible to allow that kid to go to a school that is going to allow them to focus on learning. If you're getting beat up on the bus or you disagree with somebody on the bus, and you're going to bring that into the classroom, you're having issues on the playground or in the hall or in the classroom with other kids, that's going to impact your learning. So if you're able to, let's say you have a mother, single mom in Matsu. She gets a great job, but it's in Anchorage. And she's got a 6th grader. And she doesn't get home till 3 hours after school is out in Matsu. Wouldn't it be wonderful if that kid could hop in the car every morning with her? Be dropped off at a school right next to her work? Because if the kid gets sick or there's an issue, he's right there, she's right there. The more you can eliminate outside stressors on kids and families, better you're going to have at getting the outcomes educationally. I don't understand why we don't have the most credible public system, and that's what we're trying to make. We're the only school system in the country that brings in kids that historically have been private schoolers into our public schools through homeschool. Only system that I'm aware of. Most other systems are doing the opposite, taking public money, giving it to kids to exit the public school system and go into private school. We're doing the opposite, and they want to hamstring that. Oh, no, we don't, Dunleavy. Yeah, we do. You just had a court case last year. A court case on, quote, kids in private school using allotments to further their education as a public school student in a homeschool. Sean, there's a lot of things that happen with kids almost on a daily basis, certainly on a yearly basis. And whether you're a child in elementary school, middle school, or high school, sometimes you end up being a whole different person because of circumstance. We have to have a system that's flexible enough to focus on the kid and allow that kid in a public school setting, South or Wasilla High, homeschool, charter school, you name it, to be able to succeed the best way they can. I'm going to tell you something. If the status quo, we're only going to do it the way we've done it for 40-year crew wins, and if they think homeschoolers that have, they value when I say freedom, I'm talking about the ability to not be confined by schedules and bus schedules and so forth because they have specific needs. If people think that they're going to wake up one morning, and whether this the courts decide or a new legislature or a new governor decides that we're no longer going to support homeschooling, here's what's going to happen in Alaska. You'll lose thousands of kids out of public school, which means you lose millions of dollars out of public school districts because those kids are not going to go to the very schools you think they're going to go to, because the reasons they're not going there will still exist within their families, within themselves. So this idea that you cast a smaller net and force as many fish into it as possible makes no sense at all. It's not going to happen. You'll lose more people to homeschooling not associated with public schooling.
Hello, Governor. Can you explain what you trust local control with and when it should be dictated from state and federal mandates?
Yeah, I trust local control when the needs of students and parents are really focused on, so you get better educational outcomes. People have cited the Moore case, one side of the coin, of course. Dunleavy, the Moore case says you got to put more money in education. We're going to see you again on the Moore case. Yeah, what else does the Moore case say? State needs to intervene when student performance is not happening. That was one of the impetuses behind the Reading Act. How do I know that? Because when Tom Begich and I worked together, our offices worked together on the READS Act, Tom was part of that whole, the SEAC movement that was part of the Moore case. That you just can't give money and then forget about what's happening. So when it comes to local control, if you look at the AS 1400s, there are pages and pages and pages that the legislature put into place that compel the Department of Education to intervene when education is not happening. What we're doing with the policies is we believe that this is an approach to impact that. What we're doing with the READS Act and increasing our focus on reading, we believe does that. So local control, according to the courts, is what you really want. But if the system is not performing, the courts look at the Department of Education to, quote, intervene. And there's a lot of statute on intervention. If you really want to talk about local control, the localist, if that's a word, control, it's your parent. Your parent and your family, that's the ultimate local control. Did you have a follow-up? Okay, why don't we let her.
Do you support the Department of Education then?
Do I support the Department of Education? Yes. Yes, I do. You talking about the state or federal? No, not really. I mean, when you say support the federal, when you say support the federal, I mean, the question is, I can't point to any one topic that the Department of Education in Washington has done to improve the outcomes for kids. The grant monies, the special ed monies, we've always argued that those resources help, but having a concept of a department, that would be like, to some extent, that's like saying, do I support the IRS? Not really. I think there's other ways to do it. Okay.
Mark Sabatini. Mark Sabatini, Juneau Empire. You talked about the state's growing deficit, the increased struggle with the financial situation, and I'm sure you see my question coming, which is...
I can see your questions coming from a mile away.
Yeah. The lower revenue being cited is due to a drop in oil prices, which are expected to continue to drop under the Trump administration's policies. There's increasing talk of a recession, the possibility of that. Higher prices due to tariffs, which will cost the state money, uncertainty about having to pay for things like Medicaid and all that. So this is all coming from an administration that you support, but it's causing this situation.
No, it's not. But go ahead. Continue with your question. That was a good move, but no, it's not, and I'll tell you why in a moment.
So it all comes down to where does this put your statement you've made before about every day being Christmas in Alaska?
Yeah.
Alaska's facing a huge financial crisis right now.
Can I answer the question, Mark? You got great questions, by the way. So Saudi Arabia and OPEC are producing more oil. That's a big part of this problem, a huge part. And every time we've had a dip in oil prices, you've had either an overproduction issue with OPEC or some financial crisis like in '07 that slows everything down, okay? So that's a big part of what's happening on oil right now. I can cite 2 times. I can cite right before COVID, Russia and OPEC colluded on dropping oil prices, and they dropped like a rock, and then we went into COVID. So I'll go to the Christmas question, right? So really what you're asking me, Mark, and let me help you out here, is you support Trump and Trump's doing bad things. But basically you did. Okay. Yeah. And so Christmas every day in Alaska, this has been the best president for Alaska from my perspective as a resource state than any I can think of in history. The last president we had from my hometown of Scranton, Pennsylvania, President Biden, did everything he could to shut down resource development in Alaska. Everything he could to shut it down. That's a fact. You'll cite the gas line like I do. That's about it. So what would Alaska look like under a Biden, you brought it up, a Biden-Harris regime going forward? More of that. So where do we make our money? Great idea. Let's just tax the oil companies that exist now. That's our solution. That's our long-term solution under a Biden-Harris administration. Trump comes in, puts out forth an executive order that says we're going to do our best to open up Alaska's ability on federal lands to produce more resources, which will create more jobs in Alaska, bring more people, hopefully, to Alaska, so we can impact especially our local economies. And hopefully we get more oil through Pika, Horseshoe, and others that are on state land, and we have revenue going forward. I've spent, where's James? James, I have your article framed in my office, by the way, 2017. And then one paragraph that says, I want to try and do my best to bring in more investment in Alaska. And so we're talking about things like data farms and so forth. So I'll go back to Mark's question. I do believe that the tariffs and the trade issues have upended the world as we know it. But I also believe that President Trump's desire to help Alaska capitalize on the resources in Alaska, and yes, they're on federal lands, but capitalize in the state of Alaska, I think are going to create more jobs in the long run if it's not upended in the next election.
Okay, now let's go to Nat Hurst with Northern Journal.
Thanks. I guess I'm just curious, can you tell us how good of a job you think Alaska's system of public schools is currently doing as it is set up without any of these reforms that you're proposing?
Well, if we look at the NAEP scores, if we look at some of the historical assessments done years ago, we could always do better. Bear with me. We could always do better. We have some schools that are performing in some school districts incredibly well by whatever assessment matrix, evaluation matrix we're looking at, are doing really well. And we have some that are doing very poorly if you look at metrics. So it's a mixed bag. But when you look at the NAEP scores, for example, grades 4 through 8, reading and math especially, given periodically, it will appear that our system is struggling. When you look at our charter schools, if you believe in the study, if you exclude that study, there was a study, I believe, back in '07 that I could dig out for some folks that showed even back in '07 that Alaska's charter schools were doing well. So as a system, what we want to do is become systemic like Mississippi did and continually improve their reading proficiency. And I think we're going to get there. But I think it's a mixed bag now. I think you have some of the best schools that there are in the state of Alaska, and I believe that there are some schools that are struggling mightily. I think most public school teachers are doing a good job. I do. I think most public school, this argument, and shame on those who want to throw the teachers into the argument. The teachers are victims of the politicization of education as much as the kids and the parents are, to be honest with you. They really are. And that's unfortunate. I'm telling you, when you're 18 or 19 years old, sure, the commissioner would say the same thing, and you're embarking on a career in education, you're going into your freshman and sophomore classes in college. You're doing that because you want to help kids. You're doing that for that aha moment. You could all you guys remember one of your favorite teachers, maybe some teachers you didn't care for, but your favorite teachers, and why. And usually it was because they did something, there was something that clicked. They did something maybe on a regular basis that you believe really helped you. So no, I think most Alaskan teachers, I worked with them. I was part of the mentor project. I was the leader, a coordinator of it. I think they want to do good. I think they do good. I think when it doesn't happen, it's because they don't have the support or they're new. That's why we did the mentor project. But the politics of education, you know, it's felt by teachers as well.
Okay. We have Anna Leonis with the Nome Nugget.
Hi, Governor.
Hi.
The Bering Strait School District is facing an $11 million deficit next year. What do you think the solution is for districts or communities that aren't necessarily set up to have homeschool or charter school programs?
They'll get a benefit of the increase in the BSA that we're talking about. They'll get an increase in that BSA.
Completely.
Well, and I can't address that. I can't address the Bering Strait School District, by the way, which is my first school district I taught in Koyuk, Alaska. I can't address that question specifically because I haven't looked at their fiscals, to be honest with you. You have the conversations. But I would say that we support 100% an increase in funding to education. And we're going to get a funding in education. And we'll see where that goes. But, you know, some of these numbers, I'm not totally sure what they're based on. But I just had a meeting with board members from a rural school district. And districts are in different shapes. They're in different fiscal situations. But I just had one that said that they're doing okay. And I'm not just saying that to counter what you're saying. There are school districts in different situations financially. And that may be another discussion we need to have going into the summers. How do we look at the foundation formula and the way we fund education that was put into place in the 1990s and how things have evolved since then? And we have to look at factors that are different, energy factors for rural school districts that are different. A whole host of different factors. I think, look, I'm willing to look at education funding as a whole. I'm willing to look at a long-term fiscal plan, not just a tax and spend plan, long-term. We get into the habits of a lot of emotion gets pent up because of issues in some of our systems like school districts, and we slam a chunk of change on the table, and that solves it for a little while. I think we should have a discussion about inflation-proofing education funding going forward, to be perfectly honest with you. And I would have that conversation. So I can't specifically address BSSD, their issue right now, but we know we need more money. I think having the policy side of the coin is going to help with that discussion and getting that money across the finish line.
Okay, Jeff Landfield with the Alaska Land Fund.
Hey, Governor. Going. I had a question about, there's a governor's race next year, and two of your department heads, Craig Taylor and Adam Crum, are kind of widely speculated.
Or what? I didn't hear that one part.
Rumored to be running for governor. And I'm wondering if you have a policy on people in your administration who are going to run for governor, especially those two who can sign off on tax settlements, which are not public.
So I'm gonna frame that question. You're asking me if there's any ethical concerns about individuals that currently have roles, such as the two individuals you mentioned, and that am I concerned that their decisions or behaviors may impact? That's where a transparent government comes in place. That's where people need to watch what we all do and make their own determination if decisions that were made were based upon political situations or future campaigns. We all need to keep an eye on that. Excuse me? Yeah, because that's right. That's prohibited by law. I would hope our folks would do the absolute best, Jeff, to be honest with you. And I know that's probably an answer that doesn't satisfy people, but the assumption is that you're going to be ethical when you're dealing with things such as tax settlements in the state of Alaska. I don't know if that question satisfies or answer satisfies the question.
Okay, let's go to James Brooks with the Alaska Beacon.
Governor, right now in the House's draft budget, there's a $1,000 one-time BSA increase. If that were to make it through the budget process and come back to you, what do you do if you're presented with that?
A 1,000 one time, which would be about 250 million. I think we'd have to have the discussion. I would have the discussion with finance leaders to take a look at that, to see where we would draw that money from to make that happen. But I'd be willing to have that discussion. I mean, that's a great question. So we can have that discussion. We got 34 days to do this. Oh, and another thing I just want to mention. Thanks for reminding me. Oh, Janice is back there. You don't have to go anywhere. I asked Janice to do me a favor because and it's not your question. That people have been saying, where's the governor? You know, the governor is not here when we need the governor, right? I mean, well, first of all, the governor's not the 61st legislator. But I asked Janice to do three things, and you could just yell it from there, Janice. How many days did we have in session last year and up to today? How many days is that? Okay. How many days on the calendar did we have meetings pertaining to education, roughly? I was engaged with legislators, legislative leadership in meetings on 142 days. Sometimes people say, where's the governor? Because when you get into a quandary here in the legislature and you're not getting along with the people sitting next to you, you're looking for help. Well, I've been here and I'm a phone call away, even if I'm in Taiwan trying to get an LG line. I'm here. I'm engaged with my people that are engaged with people constantly. And so it's not you, James. It wasn't your question, but I just wanted to bring that up because I hear that as, where's the governor? Well, it's a big state and we're at the top of the world. And if I got to go to Washington to deal with some issues, I got to get on a plane and do that. So that takes a couple days. But generally speaking, we've been working this education issue. Let's be frank. This has been the biggest issue the last 2 years. And we can wrap it up in 34 days. Anyway.
Smith with the Alaska Beacon.
Hi, Governor. Thank you. I was hoping you could speak more to the teacher, both shortages seen in the state already and high rates of turnover and impending notices going out for potential layoffs. Even with the 680 BSA increase, like Kenai Peninsula was facing cutting back 160 teachers and staff. And so could you speak more to that? Also cited that with each teacher leaving, the cost for recruitment and training is estimated at $20,000 for the state.
Yeah,
So
I'll take the last part first and then
Thank
give
you.
Dina time. Yeah, it's cost money to replace. That's why last year we had a teacher recruitment retain bonus in our approach to education. That was killed by NEA. $5,000 for somebody in Anchorage to stay there for 3 years, $5,000 a year, stay there. So you don't go recruit a new teacher and they're there to help the kids. $10,000 for rural districts. So they stay there. And $15,000 a year for our most difficult districts to get people. That was a $67 million price. They're doing it all over the country, by the way. So they're doing it all over the country. And some of our teachers are thinking about leaving and going there. I get it. I understand it. The BSA only approach doesn't guarantee raises in teacher salaries. It doesn't. That's through a negotiation process that each school district undergoes. Just like it's said in the legislature, a budget is a statement of values. Well, in a school district, it is too. We did budgets. We put budgets together. Personnel is your biggest cost. But in answer to that last part of the question, and I'll let Dina just talk a little bit about turnover that we're hearing. you put your resources where your biggest problem is. And that's what we proposed last year, is that in rural Alaska, where I spent most of my time, you have high turnover. But if you can recruit teachers and keep them there, with the incentives that we had in place, we believe that we could. We've been working on teacher recruitment for years. We did studies. Dr. Barbara Adams, I commissioned a study several years ago to figure out what it is that would keep teachers in place. I was the coordinator for the Mentor Project. But that $67 million spend to get teacher recruitment and retainment bonuses was not supported by NEA Alaska, the union that's supposed to support teachers. You want to talk?
Thank you. To speak more on a few of those items, in 2020, the governor did put forth several $1 million to support a study statewide on retention and recruitment, and we like to focus on retention first because we want to keep our folks here in our schools. Pandemic happened, nevertheless, in fall of 2023. The report came out. It's called the TRR Playbook. It is online, and it demonstrates a collective effort of over 4,000 educators and other stakeholders in the state. They did prioritize as a number one fact that they would like is additional payment or having to do with compensation. So the governor's bill last year, as well as coupled in the omnibus bill this year, did include exactly what educators asked for, which was an additional payment for 3 years. And it was to study whether this would make an impact on retention. Additionally, in that report was to provide more homegrown educators, if you will. If you're familiar with rural Alaska school districts, a lot of our classrooms are supported by local educators and para-educators that did not have an opportunity to leave their village, leave their homes, and go to college. We are providing a system for apprenticeship, teacher apprenticeship, coupled with the Alaska State Mentor Program for mentoring. We did get federal approval for this apprenticeship to increase teachers in Alaska. We've also engaged in agreeing to teach through this TRR work to get, we are a large military-friendly state, to have soldiers as well as their families transition into education field if they want. So many of the aspects of that TRR work are now triggered in our actions in the Department of Education. Speaking to specifically those teachers that may or may be laid off. Essentially, if you look around, and we did some studies on the budgets that were presented by school districts, some school districts that may see fewer reductions took the governor's words at his first press conference that his input into the education bill at that time was about $175,000 or $1 million rather. They took that impetus that money will be in education. We just need a solid bill that couples policy as well as funding. They took that bet. They put a placeholder in there. Their budgets are not as significant as laying off hundreds of teachers. Other districts took the impetus and created budgets that showed a 0% increase from the state. Right here in Juneau, both of those budgets were placed in. At the 680, the Juneau School District came out with a balanced budget. A few weeks later, their board voted on a 0 input, and now they do have a deficit as well as others. So the details do matter in this complex system that we have. This is my 35th year in public education, and this is not a new procedure that you go through in balancing a budget and understanding what the state is going to do. However, this bill does have built-in funding year over year with policy. This will help school districts plan, and it is a darn good deal. It is an excellent bill that supports public education in Alaska and supports families and allows parents to be in the driver's seat and supports teachers in their classrooms with a cell phone prohibition, as well as other impetuses for the charter schools. It provides school districts, 32 of our 52 school districts outside of Mount Edgecombe have charter, or rather correspondence programs. This bill allows those school districts to claim a full average daily membership for each of their correspondent students. This bill helps school districts funding. So I want to just, you have to look at the detail of those questions and how those deficits are communicated, because they are not uniform across the state of Alaska. Thank you.
Yeah, and these facts sometimes are very inconvenient. And you know, I'll tell you one thing I didn't do when I was in education, especially as a policymaker. You know, it's called the Washington Monument concept, or the child on a gurney. You block out the facts and the data that can get you to a clear decision by hyping up the hysteria on the destruction of public education. Since I've been in office, where's Lacey? Have we reduced the budget in education? No, we haven't. I haven't. I know the narrative is I hate education, that I hate kids, that I hate teachers, and that I'm cutting everything. That's not true. The facts don't support that. But that's the narrative that's going to be out there. Some of you guys will write things that kind of like squirt a little lighter fluid on it. It's just the way it is. But it makes it difficult to get to a clear-headed decision, because a lot of folks down here are driven by the hysteria and the emotion. But the facts are, we put money in education. We maintain money in education. The facts are that in our bills, very transparent. There's $67 million for teacher retention or recruitment bonuses. Teacher union didn't like it. Teacher union didn't like it. That's a head scratcher, along with all these other head scratchers. So we got 34 days left. We can get this thing done. If they came back on Monday, we can get this thing done that week, next week. It's not that hard. But for some reason, somewhere, there's someone behind the curtain, or a Rollo Tomasi somewhere, that is saying, don't do it. Don't put those policies in there. Die on this hill. And then if you do, we'll portray the Republicans especially as hating education. And then we will win the next elections. What a horrible approach to public policy. Terrible approach to public policy. So if I were you guys, I would be waiting at the airport when they land, whatever date it is going to be next week, and say, Governor just rolled out a new bill. He's willing to put money in it, wants us to tell and get this done. Policies, Kenai and others are already saying they do it, just wants to make sure it's codified. What do you guys say? Why don't you ask them? Instead of just the hysteria churning machines that we have going on. So I think we're over here with Becky.
Yeah, Becky Borer, Associated Press.
Give me another one.
Governor, in your 2023 State of the State speech, you mentioned carbon and the potential there, and you mentioned it could generate billions in revenue over time. Do you still stand by those estimates? And since those bills have been in place, what have you seen in terms of level of interest? Do you think that area is as robust, perhaps? Is there as much interest as there was when you introduced those bills?
So our my DNR guy's not here, but I believe we got the final regulations completed, I'm going to say several months ago. We've had discussions with at least two companies on carbon sequestration. We are having, I don't want to misspeak, there's discussions on carbon offsets with trees. I don't know exactly where the market is today. I can't tell you where the carbon market is today, but I do believe it is still I do believe it's a tremendous opportunity for Alaska. So for example, when we were over in Asia, the Asian countries and the individuals we spoke to are still very interested in dealing with carbon. That's their decision. When it comes to the gas pipeline, for example, they ask, and then we had conversations about how low carbon the gas is. But there's also interest in some of the Asian countries shipping over carbon to Alaska and sequestering it in the basin for payment. So those discussions are not dead. They may not have moved as quickly as possible, but we just passed these bills here about a year and a half ago, and the regulations took time to put together. So as we're marketing the gas line, we're also marketing our ability to intake carbon. So I think you'll see that as part of a discussion that Alaska gas, we hope because of our proximity to the Asian markets, but also the low carbon impact on shipping that gas, but the low carbon impact also at potentially making hydrogen on site in Nikiski and sequestering the carbon there, but also carbon that's produced in other Asian countries being transported. That's still a reality. That's still a discussion that's happening. So it just hasn't happened like that. So I do believe that we have tremendous opportunity to have a market in carbon as we go forward.
So, Governor, I'd love to ask Bill. You referenced the state's dire fiscal situation as one of your reasons, maybe your first reason for vetoing the bill. Meanwhile, you've also said, no new taxes, don't reduce the PFD. You've mentioned hesitancy to spend from savings. You mentioned the SBR earlier. I guess my question is, how do you pay for all of this? My quick back-of-the-envelope math shows that this bill is somewhere on the order of $39 million less than the bill that you vetoed. Meanwhile, the state faces hundreds of millions of dollars of deficits to keep up with basically the status quo, which is a 680 BSA and that sort of thing. How should lawmakers close the budget gap in order to afford this increase to school funding that you propose?
Yeah, so if I was totally in charge, which I'm not, it's a divided government, I would go into the CBR to help pay for this. We talked about that at the beginning when we put our budget in place. And then I would immediately, in earnest, put together a team that really wants to get to a compromise, okay? A compromise is truly a compromise, meaning you're not going to get all that you want, and at times you got to swallow something that you would normally upchuck. But in order to deal with a diverse legislature, folks on far sides of the spectrum, in the middle of the spectrum, you can't legislate as if everyone thinks the same as 5 or 6 people. So I have said this, I said this weeks ago, a year and a half or 2 years ago, I proposed this. We get together and we put together a long-term, sustainable fiscal regime package. You're going to get to that. The thing is, you got time this year to do it. If you run out of savings and the revenue picture gets worse and worse, if it does, you may run out of runway to make some good decisions as opposed to some abrupt, dramatic decisions. So I will say this again. Let's get together with a small team in June. Let us work over the summer and bring in all kinds of ideas to craft a fiscal approach that will be sustainable, a fiscal approach that'll deal with the highs and lows, a fiscal approach that encompasses everything from how do we create more revenue going forward? Part of that was Becky's question. How do we create revenue streams immediately? How do we create a revenue picture within the fiscal picture so we don't have extremes, so we don't find ourselves in this position? And so we're getting to the end of the rope, in a way, literally, right? Rod of savings, SBR, CBR. There's those that want to put the ERA into the Constitution, some to protect it from a simple vote. Yeah, these are all realities. It should push us to sit down and say to ourselves, I may not like you. Talking about legislators, governor. I may not like you. And every time I see you, there's a cringe factor. But I'm going to put what the needs of Alaska are ahead of what I think of you, okay? If I can get a critical mass of individuals that want to put the needs of Alaska, our schools, our teachers, highways open, the roads working, the tunnels working, the police on the roads. If I can get a critical mass of folks And we could even have a short therapy session where we sit around and look at each other and say, I really don't like you. Okay, good. All right, we've been on that. I don't like you. Okay, now let's do what Alaska needs. I think we can get something done this summer. We do. So yeah, go ahead. You can.
So based on what you're saying, this summer.
Well, we're not going to get it. We're not going to get it done. Reality is, we're not going to get it done here in the next couple of weeks.
Even though Kentucky does it in 30 days.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
So
I'm with you.
The question that I wanted to
If they want to, if we get a critical mass, I'll work on it now. Yes.
The question that I wanted to follow up and clarify is, it sounds like, is passing this school funding increase and policy bill contingent on passing something resembling a fiscal plan? Sounds like the answer is
it doesn't have to be. We're running out of time for the schools, right? You got your boroughs that got a week or so left to be able to put forth their budgets. It doesn't have to be. Look at the stuff that we put forward is not crazy, okay? People may not like it. Special interests may not like it. They may want it their way and only their way, and that's what we're wrestling with here. But it's not crazy. But we have to deal with the big problem. A sustainable fiscal plan that lasts and is predictable. Predictability is what we have to do. We can do it. But we gotta go through a purging system of where we don't want to deal with each other, or that guy next to me, or that one over there, or that guy up the hall, or whatever, and just say, we got to do this for Alaska, instead of saying the next guy. There's no more rope for the next guy to hang on to. We're at the end of the rope here. So we got time to do it this summer. It's not an election year, right? So this is a time to do it, and hopefully we can. So if anyone's listening to me, let's have a discussion on this. So with that, first of all, we got Easter coming up, Easter holiday. I hope all of you are safe and enjoy your Easter. Those of you that have little kids, these holidays are always fun. We got work to do down here. I would ask the legislature, and I would ask the special interests that are, I hope they have an enjoyable Easter too, but I would ask them to put state 741,000 people. Oh, and by the way, the state's population has grown. You guys have got to correct that, some of you, okay? Some of them, they're exiting the state. It's grown, there's more jobs, et cetera, et cetera. But this is not rocket science. We just had 5 celebrities fly into space on a rocket and come back and kiss the ground, okay? We can really put some policies in a bill, agree upon funding, and get that out of here, and then start the discussion on a long-term fiscal plan. I'm here. This is not the first time I've said these things. Not the first time. What do I think of metal detectors? They detect metal. What do you mean? I mean, what do I think of them? What do you mean, what do I think of them, Jeff? Of metal detectors? Some places, I'm sure you want a metal detector, right? If you're going into a Trump rally, you want a metal detector, right? The guy's been shot once, but down here, I'm not gonna weigh into the. If we can put as much time into solving this education bill the next week as we do metal detectors, I'll be happy. Have a great Easter, guys. Thank you.
And there you have it. That was Governor Mike Dunleavy as he was announcing that he has vetoed the House Bill 69, which originally they said was a stripped down version, but it did contain a 1,000 BSA. That's the per student funding increase. And today he said he has vetoed that, but he is intending to submit his own bill by later today that would have a $700 increase to the BSA. He said he thinks that it's got more in it. He said initially the reason he has vetoed the bill that was put before him was because it didn't have any changes in policy and it was just money. So that's what we got from today. We of course are going to follow this story throughout the day, and you can find more information on our website. We have a detailed story up there, and we will continue to follow it, as I said, through the day. You can join us tonight at 4, 5, 6, and 10, and on the noon broadcast as well. So we'll see you there.